Hello, my amazing students. Um, Thank you for continuing to be on this ride with me. I know the last week we have been sorting through a lot of things, trying to make sure that we understand all of the course expectations. And so thank you for being patient through that process. Thank you for taking the time to read announcements and to stay engaged. I really appreciate all of you who have reached out and who have gotten the clarification that you need. And I'm really proud of you all for kind of rising to the occasion. I know there's a lot going on in this course, and I'm sure that some of you have other courses as well as other responsibilities. So thank you. And I'm proud of you, and we're going to get this figured out. We're going to find our rhythm, and we are going to do this thing. So I just wanted to start by just acknowledging all the hard work that I see you doing to stay engaged and to complete assignments. And so I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that. So now let's hop in. We're on chapter 3, if you can believe it. This chapter is about sensations and perceptions. As with probably all of the chapters in this book, I find this incredibly helpful and fascinating. And as said before, I won't be able to cover this in its entirety. I won't be able to do it full justice, so please read the chapter. There are some really interesting things that I will not have time to get to, but that are really fascinating and worth your time. So as always, please read. But let's talk a little bit about sensations and perceptions. To start with, just kind of a basic overview. Sensations kind of tell us what's going on outside of our mental world. It kind of gives us information about what's going on around us. And then perception really just helps us make sense of all of these sensations that we're experiencing, so that we know how to act on them. So to go into a little bit more detail, let's talk about the 5 main senses. I'm sure coming into this course, most of you are familiar with these. I think we've probably been talking about them, in some way since, preschool, when we, learn our rhymes about, the senses. But let's just go through them really quickly, just as a refresher. The 5 senses are, of course, sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch. Some might argue that there's a 6th sense, which some might call intuition or ESP, or the ability to see dead people. Have any of you seen that movie, The Sixth Sense? I remember when I saw that for the first time, and I was just so fascinated. I thought it was just the best thing. My anxiety these days probably could not handle another viewing, but if you have not seen it and you would like to be equal parts intrigued and terrified, The Sixth Sense will do that for you. So, but for the purposes of academia, we're really going to focus on the 5 senses. And I want to talk a little bit about this within kind of a broader professional context. For my first 5 or 6 years working in the mental health field, I worked at a therapeutic foster care agency in the Seattle area. And working with foster children, I realized very quickly that because of some of the environments that they'd grown up in, they had a lot of sensory integration issues, a lot of attachment issues. And so I remember preparing to speak at a foster care conference and just doing a lot of research on this attachment, specifically the sensory part of attachment, why this is important, how we can kind of heal and reset this for kiddos who haven't had healthy sensory experiences during really important developmental years. And so I was doing tons and tons of research, and there is a lot out there. There are some brilliant people who have done work on this. And so I was able to kind of borrow from some of their research. I just learned a ton about how we can reset emotional memories through sensory experiences. And so, just to give you an example of what this would look like, sometimes foster families would use like a specific kind of scented lotion. And so after, kiddos would have bath time, they would put, lotion on their arms, lotion on their legs, and it would have this scent. And in doing that, they were resetting some of the smell and touch sensory experiences. And as they would do this over time, some healing would happen in regards to that sensory integration. This can also be done with music. Having, like a family dance party every night before bed, using the same song. And so there's some movement involved, but there's also some hearing involved. Also, special foods can be a big part of this, maybe having a weekly meal that you do every week. And so some of that taste is involved in resetting some of those sensory experiences. And so this became really important in regards to how we were providing care or helping foster families provide care for kiddos who needed to reset some of their sensory integration. And there's lots and lots of ideas out there about how this can be done. And it's really powerful, and I've seen it be really successful. And so the book talks through, a lot more information about the senses. It talks a little bit about habituation and sensory adaptation, which I think is really interesting. Basically, this idea that when we're in a certain situation for a period of time, we kind of get used to it. And so it talks about you could walk into your home and all of a sudden be hit with, a garbage smell and just think, oh, that's awful. But then you get, kind of distracted with something else, and the day goes on and you completely forget and you get used to the smell. And then, someone else gets home and goes, oh my goodness, what's that smell? And you realize that you've gotten used to it over time. Same thing with like the ticking of a clock. The book talks about that. So, when you first, come into a space, you may notice that a clock is ticking. But as you spend time in that space and you're doing other things, over time, you become adapted to those things. So I think that's just fascinating. Last week we talked about the brain and all the different complex ways that the brain works, and I think this just kind of is another fascinating part of that kind of complex puzzle, which is the brain and our emotions and our senses. And so also last week I talked about, if you remember, how the sense of smell has its own unique way that it travels through our complex, nervous system and brain system, and how those and how the sense of smell is stored in a different part of the brain than our other senses. And so I reminded you that might be a good tip for your next party. But again, just a reminder that olfactory information or information related to the sense of smell is sent to higher cortical areas of the brain. And those areas of the brain are really important for forming and storing emotions. And so if you think about, emotions that you have related to smell, it is really interesting how quickly a memory can come to mind when we smell certain things, because there's such a strong tie to emotion because of where those memories are stored in our brain. And so, I'm sure all of you have walked into a space and smelled something and had it trigger a memory from your past? I'm guessing both positive and negative. For me, one of the things that really sticks out is my brother and I would spend summers with my grandparents in rural North Carolina. And it was just, just the best part of my childhood. And my grandmother used Jergens lotion, which I don't know if you're familiar with Jergens lotion, at least the original scent, but it has a very unique smell that's a little bit cherry and a little bit something else. But anyways, my grandma used this all the time. And every time I smell it, it just takes me back to a time when I just felt really safe and where life just felt like it made sense and when I was happy. And so I notice whenever I smell Jergens lotion, I immediately have an emotional response. And the same goes for the rose scents. My grandfather tended rose bushes when I was growing up, and he used to always cut them and bring them into the house, and he would make special arrangements for me when I would stay during the summer. And I must tell you, I am wild about everything rose. I have rose perfume. I have rose facial moisturizer. I just love the rose scent. And my husband, teases me about it, about my grandma scent, but I don't care because it just ushers memories again of just safety and happiness and just the happiest times of my life. So I would love for you guys to spend a moment and just think about, certain smells that elicit emotional memories for you. I'm sure, I'm sure we all have them. And I would also say that this is probably true for other sensory experiences as well. I know for me, music is a big one. Songs can really elicit a lot of emotional memories for me. But I know for some people, this could also include foods. If you grew up in a home where you had a lot of familiar foods, and then you have those maybe after some time, and they just kind of elicit, either positive or negative emotional memories. And the same can be said for things that we might see, um, movies. Can certainly elicit emotional memories. I would say that our senses have a lot to do with our emotional memories and emotional responses to those memories. The book talks a little bit about taste and how taste is one of the earliest developed senses. And I thought that was really fascinating. The book goes into a little bit more detail and talks about how our preferences for taste are being set even in our mother's womb. Even during infancy, even during these really early developmental stages, already we are setting preferences in regards to foods. I think that can play out in really interesting ways too. You grow up in a home and you have certain foods and certain preferences for foods, and then you spend time with other friends who have, different families of origin, maybe different cultures, and the foods that they eat and love may be really different than the foods that you eat and love. And I just think that that is really interesting that those preferences for taste are set so early. And this can be a positive and a negative. I know one of the things that I kind of regretted growing up is that my family didn't focus more on fruits and vegetables. It just wasn't something that we had around a lot, especially not during the times that I was living predominantly with my single mother, who was working full time and was just trying to keep everyone fed, right? So we just didn't have a lot of fruits and vegetables around the house. And so I noticed that as I moved into, adolescence and adulthood, I had to kind of choose to reset some of those preferences. And to be honest, if I just defaulted those things probably, they're not my go-to. It's definitely not my default setting to reach for an apple. And so I think that is important to think about, especially as parents, how we're setting taste preferences for children really early on. And so, as we talk about the senses and how integral they are to, emotional development, emotional memories, we have to start to talk about perception, which is how we kind of make sense of all of this sensory input. Perception helps us take all of, this input from sight, sound, smell, hearing, touch, and the way that we experience it and the way that we interpret it is inevitably going to be different depending on the environments that we find ourselves in. And so perception becomes this really interesting and important thing. Like I said, human perception is obviously going to be influenced by our cultural experiences, by our, religious experiences, by the families that we grow up in, the communities that we grow up in, our different races, our different socioeconomic backgrounds. All of this is going to inevitably impact the way that we see and engage with the world. And so I think it's important that we realize this. The book talks about something called perceptual set or perceptual expectancy. And this can get a little problematic because what it essentially means is that we are prone to misinterpret information due to our set expectations. And our set expectations are going to be based on previous experiences and the expectations that grew out of those experiences. And our perceptions are going to be limited to the experiences that we've had. And so that's inevitable. But the challenge is that we be open to new experiences and that we look for opportunities for new sensory input, that we broaden our perceptions, that we make room for new things, that we consider other points of view, and that we challenge the way that we think things are supposed to be done because of our perceptual expectancies. And so that can be really hard. When you've had certain sensory experiences and you have made sense of your world based on your perception of those experiences, it can be really hard to let in new information, to consider that not everybody has had the same experiences that you've had, and not everybody perceives the world the same way because they've had their own experiences. And so I think, and especially in our current society, it's such a powerful challenge to remain open and to try new things and to listen to other people, especially other people who have had different experiences than you. It doesn't mean that you have to change your mind. It just means that you have to be open. And so that's my big challenge for you. This week, I would love for you to purpose to try something new. Maybe a new food that you've never tried. Maybe some new music that you've never listened to. Maybe a new cultural or faith experience that you've never had. So in the comment section of the video, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you think about this idea of broadening your horizons and ensuring that you don't get stuck. And maybe talk a little bit about what you might want to try new this week in an effort to achieve that. I also do just want to mention quickly before I end this video that there is some really cool information towards the end of the chapter about illusions. Specifically, they talk about Herman Grid and his gray dots, but also the Muller-Lyer illusion, where you see one line as longer than the other because of the angles on the ends of the lines. So some of those illusions, optical illusions, some of those are really interesting and really cool. And if we were in a traditional classroom setting, it would be really fun to play with some of that and to be able to engage a little bit more with that. But we're not, and so we're a bit limited, but please do spend some time on that. I think it's really fun, really interesting. I am really intrigued by optical illusions, and so I get a real kick out of that. So spend a little time with that as just a way to have a little bit of fun with the course. And so I will leave you with that. Again, I'm just really proud of you guys for stepping up and settling in and just purposing to kind of figure this all out and to do well. As I've said before, my heart for all of you is that you would be successful in this class and that you would just learn and grow and broaden. And so I really want that for you. That is my heart. And even as some of my announcements may seem maybe a little bit harsh at times, please know that that's not my heart. My heart is never to be harsh. My heart is for you all to be successful, not only in this course, but in life in general. So please know that. I am cheerleading for all of you. I'm hoping, yeah, I'm just hoping all the good things. So, but yeah, I think that's all for this week. Thanks again for letting me get to know you, for being on this ride, and I will talk to you again soon. All right, bye-bye.